I couldn't believe that I was empathizing with this famous author. Like I was feeling right alongside with him through portions of the book. I was feeling what he was feeling. I understood it and I got it. I was right there with him. And then in the next page, I was standing next to him thinking, oh my God, why are you being such a jerk? And in the next minute, I was back to feeling that emotion with him again. I was going through this roller coaster of emotions and just befuddled at the fact that I was feeling what this famous author had felt. Sandy says read, and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to do a review and discussion of Mr. Dickens and His Carol by Samantha Silva, but we're going to begin talking about A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, because of course we must go over the original before we talk about how it came to be. Now, the how it came to be is a fictionalized version of how A Christmas Carol was written, okay? And Samantha is right up front telling us that she imagined this and she took great creative liberties in writing this novel of Mr. Dickens and His Carol, okay? Before we get started, I want to welcome you guys to please subscribe to the channel. It takes a little bit of effort to bring some of this content to you guys, so please subscribe to the channel and enjoy all of it alongside other fellow readers who enjoy bookish stuff too. How's that for a commercial? Yeah, but you guys, this is a book. It is a book channel. We do all kinds of bookish stuff here. So if you dig the bookish stuff, this is the channel for you. I also want to mention that you can download your own Sandy Says Read bingo card so that you can play bingo while you listen to me ramble about Charles Dickens and other books that I bring to you here. There are no prizes for this, but you do get a little dopamine rush each time that I say one of these words or phrases, and you get to check it off of the box while you're listening along at home. I'll put a link to this in the drop-down box below. There we are. Okay, now, before we begin, I should probably also mention to you that my printer is completely dead. Fully dead. It is not just possessed, it is completely dead. So I am getting rid of it. I cannot print out my notes. So my notes are here on the computer. So I'm going to be looking at the computer screen quite a bit as we go through this review and discussion. I apologize ahead of time. But now let's start with the specs. All right, this is Mr. Dickens and His Carol. Author is Samantha Silva. The publisher is Flatiron Books, and it was published in 2017. That was just a couple years ago. So maybe not everyone out there has read it yet, so I'm going to be really careful not to give away spoilers. Now, obviously, there is one big, huge spoiler. Yes, Charles did finish the book. He did finish writing A Christmas Carol. We do have that novel. We do get to read it now and enjoy it here in the future. So that, I think I can go ahead and tell you, happened. He finished the book. He finished the story, but other spoilers I'm going to keep under wraps. I'm not going to spoil all the stuff that Samantha has packed into this novel because I'm going to recommend it. I do recommend that folks go out and pick this up and read this for themselves because it was fun. Let's see, this version is 271 pages, plus there's an author note and a reading group questions, a set of reading group questions at the back. It's written in third person point of view, past tense, from Charles Dickens' point of view. We get the whole story from his point of view. Now let me read the back cover for you. Oh, let's see. A story with the wit of Shakespeare in love and the evergreen heart of A Christmas Carol. Charles Dickens is not feeling the Christmas spirit. His newest book is an utter flop. The critics have turned against him. Relatives near and far hound him for money. But when his publishers try to blackmail him into writing a Christmas book, he refuses. And a serious bout of writer's block sets in. Seeking inspiration on long night walks through London, Dickens meets the mysterious Eleanor Lovejoy, who might be just the muse he needs. As Dickens' deadlines and creditors close in, Eleanor propels him on a Scrooge-like journey that tests everything he believes about generosity, friendship, ambition, and love. The story he writes will change Christmas forever. And that is delightful. Okay. Also, I want to point out, it mentions on the back cover, and we see throughout the book, Charles Dickens going on these long walks about London, going out to clear his head, going out to get inspiration, going out to just walk around London a lot. And it reminded me of when we had Morgan Richter here on the channel. We interviewed her, and she spoke of when she's in a tight spot with her writing, when she needs to clear her head, she goes out for a long afternoon walk. We had Dacre Stoker here on the channel, and he spoke of when his great grand uncle would go and walk along the shores and not just think about his books, but act out scenes in his books. And that struck me, that even Charles Dickens used to do that. He would go out on these long walks to clear his head and to get inspiration, perhaps some motivation for writing. And I believe that really was in his history. I really believe Charles Dickens did that. And a lot of authors today do as well. And I liked that. I thought that was great. One of the things that, let me get my notes moved up here. One of the things that Samantha points out for us, and she has in her author's note back here, that she took a lot of liberties with the story. Okay, so some of the things that Charles Dickens does in this novel are from her imagination. Okay, she's an author. This is fiction. She's allowed to be creative. Okay, so some of the things he did perhaps are not historically accurate. And I'm going to read for you some of her author's note to kind of let you see where she's coming from. Okay, so here is part of her author's note. This is a work of fiction. It is spun out of threads from the lives of Charles Dickens, his family and friends, and even a nemesis or two. It is meant as a playful reimagining of how the second most beloved Christmas story in the world, after the original, came to be. I have twisted, embellished, and reordered the facts, and even his children, to serve the plot. Nearly all the characters are based on real people, and the best lines, to be sure, are things they actually said. Also true is that Dickens was a literary rock star in his time, that Martin Chuzzlewit was a flop, that his publishers threatened to deduct from his pay, that Dickens was overextended, and that his relatives, his father most of all, who did once go to debtor's prison, depended on him for money. A Christmas Carol was born out of financial necessity. Most of the rest I made up from whole cloth. Okay, so she's admitting in this author's note that there are elements of it, obviously, that are from history, that are real facts. But a whole lot of this story, so much of it is imaginative, creative license. And it's so well done and so heartwarming and so lovely. There's so much of it that is just sweet. And we're going to talk about it. And as we talk about it, you'll see where I'm coming from with this idea. Okay. I do have a Sandy synopsis for you guys. Let me read for you my Sandy synopsis. I wrote, this is a fictionalized reimagining of one researcher and author's playfully augmented and embellished account of how Charles Dickens conceptualized, wrote, and delivered A Christmas Carol to the world on an immovable deadline. You guys, the deadline aspect of this was stressing me out. I mean, I knew as the reader that yes, Charles Dickens completed A Christmas Carol. I knew he completed this book right here. I knew it. We all know it. But the deadline looming over him was stressing me out. And Samantha did an awesome job of making me stressed out. She did an awesome job of making me doubt myself. I was reading through Samantha's novel. And at one point I thought, well, hang on. Did he fail the first year? And did he produce this book for the second year? Did he miss his first deadline? I mean, seriously, I was going to look it up. That's how well she wrote this novel, you guys. Okay. So let's see. We should probably talk a little bit about A Christmas Carol, because everyone out there, I'm assuming everyone out there knows the story of A Christmas Carol and how Ebenezer Scrooge is this, stingy older gentleman who has a ton of money that he doesn't want to part with, right? We have the Scrooge character who doesn't want to share his wealth. His partner, Jacob Marley, is dead, right? And Jacob Marley, in Samantha's book, we get an origin story for Jacob Marley that is wonderful. Now, I reread The Christmas Carol, and I reread it from this wonderful, delightful, just wonderful version of A Christmas Carol. And I want to show you guys, and hopefully you can see this without too much glare. I can't see what's on the screen because I got my notes up in front of me, but I'm showing you guys some of just the prettiness of this book. Okay. It is a gorgeous version of this book. Lovely. So I reread this before I dove into Samantha's book and refamiliarized myself with, Charles Dickens' style, which is wordy as it was back then, right? And just kind of got myself back into Charles Dickens' mindset and mode, like his style of writing. And I think that was a really good thing for me to do before reading Samantha's story. And I would recommend that to you guys too. If you want to sit down and read Samantha Silva's story, Mr. Dickens and His Carol, I do recommend rereading A Christmas Carol first, rereading it, because it just puts you back in that mindset. It puts you back in that feeling, back in that space. Set aside, and we're going to go back to Samantha's book. Now, I had sort of mixed reaction to the book. Even though I recommend it, I did enjoy it, I had a mixed reaction as I was reading it. And let's talk about why. There were parts of the book where I laughed out loud. I laughed at what was on the page. There were parts of the story where I was right there with Charles Dickens. I was empathizing with him. I was right there side by side with him. Okay. Then there were other moments where I was like, Charles, you suck. You are a jerk. You deserve to fall flat on your face. I was mad at him, right? And then we turned the page and I was back to sympathizing with him, feeling sorry for him, hoping he would succeed, knowing that he would succeed, right? I was going through that roller coaster of emotions, and Samantha did an awesome job of just taking me through those emotions and taking me on that roller coaster ride. Let's look at a couple of these examples on these pages. Page 10, let's start at the beginning. Page 10, we have poor Charles. He has just finished a story, and his publishers have come to him. They've come to his house. His wife, Catherine, is upstairs giving birth to their 6th child. She's upstairs in labor. She's screaming. They can hear her screaming upstairs. And his 2 publishers, was it Chapman and Hall? Chapman and Hall have come in, and they're saying to him, look, Chuzzlewit, the story with Chuzzlewit is not going well. The Americans don't like it. People are selling it at a discount. It's a flop. And we're going to be deducting from your pay every month until you give us something new, until something new that can sell well comes along. He's flabbergasted by this. He doesn't understand what they're saying to him. And they said, what you need to do is write a Christmas book. Do that for us. Here, produce. All right. And let's see. Charles, said Hall, retrieving the paper from Dickens' grasp. We are simply suggesting perhaps the public needs a bit of a Christmas book, said Chapman, unable to contain his zeal. A Christmas book? But I'm in the middle of Chuzzlewit, and Christmas is but weeks away. Not a long book, said Hall, a short book. Why, hardly a book at all. And we've organized a public reading of the book on Christmas Eve, said Chapman. A public reading of the book I have not written? Right there, I laughed out loud. The lead up to this, where, Charles Dickens is just beside himself over the news they've been giving him, one piece of bad news after another. And now they're like, write a Christmas book. Doesn't have to be long. Write this thing. And you're going to be reading it on Christmas Eve. And his response to that, I felt it in my soul. And so when he says a public reading of the book I have not written, I laughed out loud. I wrote it in the margin. I laughed out loud. Yeah, I was feeling his angst. Okay, let's see. Then page 131. I was identifying with him on page 131. Um, okay, this is where Charles has met with a gal named Eleanor, and she is talking and discussing books and such with him. She has turned into sort of a muse for him at one point in the story. And she's talking about being on the stage, being in the theater, and Charles has been on the stage like a year or so before, and he remembers it and enjoys it. He's got a friend, Macready, who is still in the theater and still performing like Hamlet and such, right? And he longs to get back on the stage. So they're discussing that. Let's see. Eleanor's eyes kindled to each word. She clapped and laughed. And applause, yes, he exclaimed, because we have given every man, woman, and child an hour or two to forget the real world and let them rejoin it with their sense of wonder restored. Never mind the press of people, the poking umbrellas, and irreconcilable cabs. We are all players in the great pantomime of life. And that is a wonderful message. I felt that one in my soul too. I wrote out to the side, the reason I write fantasy. Samantha gave these lines to Charles Dickens that basically summarize why I write and read fiction, because it takes us out of the world for a while. It takes us away and sort of like restores us for coming back to the world with a better viewpoint. Right there it is. Page 192, it says, never mind necessity. Melancholy is the mother of invention. And obviously he's in a low point where he's thinking this. Okay, there's been an incident. He has lost something important, and he's feeling melancholy, and so he's sitting down to write from a place of melancholy. And you guys, the author, the creative in me felt that one too. I'm telling you, there was a roller coaster ride going on in this story. Samantha took us on an excellent roller coaster ride, and yeah, I underlined that one. Now, I did also have moments in the story where I was frustrated with Charles. Basically, part 2 in the book, I was a little bit frustrated with him in many moments during part 2 of the book, because in part 1, and I'm not going to spoil anything, okay? I'm just giving you some of the plot with as few spoiling things as I can say. All right. Basically, in part 1, we learned that his character Chuzzlewit and the stories around Chuzzlewit are not selling well. So his publishers are telling him, you got to write a Christmas story. So he's thinking, all right, great, I've got to write a Christmas story. And he meets up with a gal from his past, this Maria Beadnell, and she is like, she's not a great gal, okay? She's married, but she's sort of insinuating herself into his life for a moment. And the idea is, well, maybe she's going to ask him for money. And he is thinking, hey, maybe if I talk to her for an afternoon, it will inspire me. Maybe I will be, inspired enough to start this Christmas story that I have to write. But when he does that, he doesn't stop and think about his family. He's got a wife who has just given birth and 5 other kids. So he's got a family at home that he's not thinking about when he sits down to talk to this old flame. Okay. And I'm disappointed in him about that. I'm disappointed in the fact that this old flame goes to his home and shares a message with his wife. So his wife is like, wait a minute, my husband is out meeting with an old flame. So things are blown out of proportion, sort of, kind of. And his wife is like, I'm leaving. I'm taking the kids. I'm going to my mother's house in Scotland for Christmas. And you get your act together, Charles. And she leaves him. She takes the kids and leaves him. And he doesn't wake up at that moment. He doesn't like beg for mercy at that moment. He doesn't beg for forgiveness at that moment. He's just like, oh, okay, that sucks. Bye. And he doesn't like learn from it. He doesn't chase after her. He doesn't try to fix it. Oh, I was frustrated with him in that moment too. So during part 2 of this book, he is looking for his muse and he's trying to write this Christmas story. And it is as if he doesn't even give a thought to his family in Scotland. And throughout part 2, when he does give a thought to his family, it is because his butler has located him and said, hey, your family needs to have these things for their Christmas in Scotland. Is it okay? Will you sign this for them to have this money? That is the thought that he gives to his family. Irritated with him about that. I was irritated with him about the way he went about like sneaking around to listen in on dinner parties where other authors were. There were just things he did that were damaging his relationships with people who were his friends. There were things he did that upset me greatly. I was disappointed in him, but he was on an arc. Okay, he was on this sort of Ebenezer Scrooge arc that he needed to be on to get that character and to get that book and to get it all to happen. I just was disappointed in him because of it. Now we do get to see his transformation. I don't want to give everything away. I don't want to tell all the parts and pieces that happened to him to do that arc. I don't want to tell it all. I don't want to give away everything in his transformation, but I do want to show one thing that Samantha wrote that was lovely, okay, about his transformation. Let's go to page 165. On 165, I wrote in the margin, the change is fully upon him now, because he's doing one of these evening, nighttime walks around London, and he stops where there is a closed prison. And he says, the prison was empty now, closed just a year, with blackened holes for windows and dead air for sound. Dickens stood before it, eyes cold and flinty, his fists deep in his pockets, clenched with each slow, spiteful beat of his heart. An implausibly warm wind on his face made him think of hell, or purgatory even better. Closed or not, this was a prison in perpetuity, a forever place of no release. Never had Dickens known the desire to despise his fellow man, but here it was in front of him now. Isn't that lovely? The way she wrote that is so good. And where it is inserted in his arc is fabulous. You guys, it's wonderful. Very well done, but he's going through a transformation. He's going through some stuff, and it's just well placed and well timed and well written. Let's go to page 183. He was no better than when she had left, when Catherine had left. In fact, worse, a tumbled down version of himself, whom he hardly recognized at all. Catherine had been right about him, but he didn't know how to fix it, and he couldn't return home or ask them to come back until he did. All he could think to do was weave back into the skein of streets in hopes of untangling himself. And isn't that nice imagery? Isn't that lovely? This thought of him going on another walk and this time untangling what he has wound up into a knot. I like that too. You guys, there's such rich writing in this book. She's done just a lovely job, fabulous job. Okay, now I don't want to give away any more. I don't want to give too much more of descriptions and stuff because I'm afraid I will start to give things away. So I don't want to do that. But let's go ahead and talk about the characters in our story. Our characters include, but are not limited to, Charles Dickens, obviously our main character. We also have Catherine Dickens. As I mentioned, she was birthing their 6th child at the beginning of the book. We have a fellow named Topping. He is a manservant or a butler who shows up. He's there at the beginning of the story, and he is there at the end of the story too. And he just sort of pops up once in a while just to remind us of, I want to say he reminds us of family. He reminds us of an anchor in what needs to be right. That's how I saw him. All right, we have Fred, who is Charles' brother, who he tries so hard to put together good things. He tries so hard to be an entrepreneur, but he just hasn't found his footing yet, right? So he's always coming to Charles for help and for money. There's John Dickens, the father, and this is reality. This is true history. John Dickens did get sent to debtor's prison at one point in Charles' life, And we see that in the story that he had been in debtor's prison. He's out, and he returns to his son again and again and again for money and for help. We have Chapman and Hall, the publishers. We have a character named John Forster. John Forster, he is a friend, and he sort of works as a literary agent for Charles. He is helping him, and he's the one who did not remove a clause in Charles' contract. So when Chapman and Hall come to Charles Dickens and are like, hey, we're going to start garnishing your wages, we're going to start deducting, 40 pounds of sterling per month from you if you don't get this Christmas story for us, if you don't start making some money for us. John Forster is the one who never thought that clause would be needed. He never thought anyone would use that clause. So he didn't worry about it when it was in their contract. And Charles was like, my God, man, they're coming after my money now because of that clause. So, yeah. All right. Then there is a character named Jacob Marley. He's a real person in this novel. He's a dude who approaches Charles Dickens I think they were in the toy store. He approaches Charles Dickens at some point in London, and he asks him for his autograph. And when Charles gives him his autograph, Jacob Marley is like, and he crumples it up and throws it at him. He's like, I thought you were Thackeray. Because Charles Dickens and William Thackeray were contemporaries, right? They were writing at the same time. In fact, there were several mentions of, Thackeray and Carlyle and Wilkie Collins and, who else? You guys, my brain just did a brain fart. Did I write it down? Anthony Trollope. So we had Anthony Trollope was also, these guys were all at like a dinner party at John Forster's house at one point, okay? But those contemporaries to Dickens are mentioned in the novel. And I thought that was a neat little literary surprise in there for us. But anyway, this fellow, Jacob Marley, thought that Dickens was Thackeray. And when he got his autograph, he's like, you're not Thackeray. And he like throws it at him. Charles is, of course, offended by that. So he's decided, well, I'm going to write a story and Jacob Marley is going to die in it. So that's how he got to be in there. And we also have the Ebenezer Temperance Society. The Ebenezer Temperance Society is a group that is trying to get some money out of Charles Dickens at the holidays. Tons of charities are after money from Charles because he's got money and he's always been willing to donate. So the Ebenezer Temperance Society is one of them. And I wrote down that I wish that Samantha had taken the opportunity to take more creative license with the name of Ebenezer. I wish that she had used the Ebenezer stone instead. But I don't know. I didn't take the time to look up the Ebenezer Temperance Society to see if that was real. I should have looked up to see if that was real. You guys out there, if you know if that is a real society from back in the day, put that in the comments below. Tell me more about it, because probably Samantha looked that up and she had that real society that she pulled from and put in here to be historically accurate. But I was wishing that she had used the Ebenezer stone, because in 1 Samuel 7 verse 12, there is a verse in the Bible that says, then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, thus far the Lord has helped us. And so the Ebenezer stone is the stone of help. And I think that Charles Dickens in this story could have used that. And I think that he would have used that. I think that could have been really cool. But I digress. I didn't write the story. Samantha did. Okay, and then our last character on the list is Maria Beadnell. Maria, she's the old flame who married this guy named Henry Winter. She married Henry because back at the time when she was dating Charles, Henry had more money and more prospects. So she dumped Charles and married Henry instead, which is a shame. Here we go. Okay, that's all of our characters. You guys, that's it in a nutshell. This without me giving away any more stuff other than, yeah, he did write the book by the deadline. And it's lovely and moving when he does go and read the story. Remember, Chapman and Hall set up a reading for him to do on Christmas Eve. He goes and he gives the reading on Christmas Eve. And it's like the climax of the story. Samantha does an awesome job of setting the scene for him to go out on the stage and give the reading. And it's just wonderful. But of course, he finished the story. We know this. Okay. Yeah. There's so much more happening in the book besides him just finishing the story. There's so many other things that I'm not spoiling for you. I do highly recommend it. Now, you guys, we have to put this book, and we're going to go ahead and put A Christmas Carol itself on the Christmas cheer chart. So let me grab the suddenly appearing Christmas cheer chart. Let me get this up here where we can see it, where you guys can see it, maybe. And you can also see my ring light glare. You guys, it's a highly professional production around here. Okay, so first we want to put A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens somewhere on the Christmas cheer chart of 2024. And you guys, yes, I think that Charles Dickens does remember the reason for the season. So on the reason for the season axis, we can be pretty high up. He doesn't go greatly into depth talking about Jesus and Jesus' birth, but he does talk an awful lot about the joyousness of Christmas, goodwill toward all men. And of course, God bless us, everyone. Okay, so we're going to be high up on the reason for the season. And in A Christmas Carol, there's an awful lot of festiveness. We see festiveness from the poor person's point of view and the very wealthy person's point of view. Okay, so we do have, it's pretty close to a light display you can see from space on the festiveness axis. Okay, so I'm going to put A Christmas Carol way, way up here in this quadrant. Not all the way, in the very top of it, but really doggone close. Christmas Carol is going right up here. Okay, very good. Now, the next one we need to chart is Mr. Dickens and His Carol by Samantha Silva. And you guys, same thing. Really, she remembered the reason for the season. We have discussions of, goodwill toward men. Now, she doesn't really go into the birth of Christ. We don't have a big discussion of, going to church for Christmas morning and discussing the birth of Christ. But we do have, God bless us, everyone, and being a good, Christian gentleman, that sort of thing. So we're going to be pretty high up on the reason for the season, not all the way as high up as Charles Dickens was, but pretty close, okay? Yes, there's a lot of festiveness in her book as well. We have people going to Christmas plays. We have people having Christmas dinners. We have Christmas parties. We have Christmas trees. We have people singing Christmas carols around a piano. Okay, there's an awful lot of festiveness. We do have a light display you can see from space level of festiveness in Samantha's book. So we're going to be way over here on the festiveness scale, almost all the way as high as Christmas Carol. So I would put her right up there. That's where I would put Mr. Dickens and His Carol by Samantha Silva. All right? Is that good enough, you guys? And you can see those dots, right? Okay, very good. You guys, thumbs up for Charles Dickens and all the goodness of Christmas. Thank you so much for tuning in.